but I'll just get right down to business. This is my first time, so be gentle. So perhaps everyone doesn't complain. I need to give you a little bit of an intro first. This is the major research paper, so it's a 60-page paper that is trying to claw its way out of the 20-page format that it's going to be right now. Because I don't want to give you a 60-page paper because you don't want to hear that right now. It's the summer solstice. There's a lot of freedom energy. We got to get to partying a little bit later, so I appreciate the bit of your attention that I am asking for now. And part two of that is I'm basically going to take a particular conspiracy theory, which is totally wild, and you may have heard of it before, and I'm trying to weld that to the notion of God. Not any particular notion of God, but the notion of God that is probably floating around in your heads right now. I'm psychically ascertaining that right now. All right, processing. Okay, we're there. All right, so it goes like this. Perhaps everyone doesn't complain, but at least everyone has heard somebody complain about a person knocking on their door, or calling them on the phone, or showing up on their television and trying to convert them to some religion or other. And in our day and age, we usually exchange some sort of a tale of mutual annoyance. This Mormon came to my door, don't you? Grumble, 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 grumble. So we nihilists don't usually like to be reminded of the warm, fuzzy feelings that our religious neighbors are walking around with, because we all know that the gods have left us to figure this out for ourselves, and we don't want to be reminded of our inability to feel otherwise. So William James spoke of these religious hypotheses in terms of live or dead wires. Depending on one's socio-historical situation, one has a finite amount of possibilities available that can maybe carry this current of religiosity. Speaking to an audience of New Englanders around the turn of the 20th century, James tells them that they probably have a choice between Catholicism or agnosticism, but Islam is probably not going to light them up. This was a different day. They didn't have the pluralism that we have today. But James is really a great thinker for this because he founds pragmatism on the shifting sands of nihilism. We don't have the sort of truths that are permanent and immovable. We have the sorts of truths that science provides, the sorts of truths of nihilism. This is true until proven otherwise. And those are the truths that consist of our world. We have these truths. We have changeable truths, perspectival truths. This isn't even surprising to any of us because this is just the sea we swim in. So Carl Jung, on the other hand, believed that the symbols of Western religious tradition have become so impoverished that they can't even hold meaning for us anymore. And instead, we chase the imagery of the East, the mystique and the potential mutability of these concepts. For Jung, we are excited mostly by the possibility for novel interpretation. This is the possibility for a truth that will run just barely out of reach through unfamiliar forests and slip seductively through eager grasp, all the while promising. And this was what captivated young St. Augustine, who rejected the simplicity of the Bible upon his first reading of it, for the superior wordplay and ability to move conceptual mountains displayed by Cicero. The Manichaean systems, rich mythology, and compelling war for the soul imprisoned in matter did basically the same thing to me. But these are mere introductions, and I need to be forthcoming about something before I go any further. I was inspired to work on this project because I had aggressive conversion attempts made upon my life by conspiracy theorists. Does anybody have a tale of mutual annoyance? Grumble, grumble. I hate when that happens. Has anyone been proselytized by conspiracy theorists? Right. It is right now. It's happening. You don't even know it yet. You're in the Matrix. So, much in the same way a missionary can be adept in steering seemingly unrelated conversation back to their God, trying to light that fire of faith in you, so too can a passionate conspiracy theorist derail conversation from its original light-hearted destiny, media, music, back to the Babylonian Brotherhood that is controlling society through the media and through the government, and back in the day through the Egyptians and through all of history, and now through the banking system, the CIA, and forming all of these things. You've all heard this, I hope, in some form or another. So while this proselytizing of the individual conspiracy theorist is not often effective, for the contemporary creative nihilist, this is sometimes a Jamesian live wire. This is something that can light that current of religiosity in us. By definition, conspiracy theories are marginalized, and as I will argue below, the ability to mobilize affective sentiment in the direction of a manifold is very difficult, and we'll see why it's a manifold in a moment. It's easier to have a personal relationship with a personal God, but these challenges for the theorist become a source of pride. My doctrine challenged me, and I accepted the challenge. My doctrine is heavy. Most people cannot bear this burden. My doctrine is rejected by the masses. It is invariably true if it's rejected by the masses, right? You know the hipster phenomenon. Okay. So belief in a super conspiracy theory is not for the true conformist. We could postulate it as for people who define themselves in contradistinction to the masses. But before I continue sketching some sort of psychological profile, I'd like to touch on some caveats. Caveat 1. I'm trying to get through this project without passing judgment on the veracity of particular conspiracies. I also want to extend this suspension of judgment to the theorists themselves as far as possible. It's going to get a bit dodgy when I start to talk about metaphysical pathology and belief in a conspiracy theory as something that can be harmful to the theorist. That's going to start to pass judgment, but I'm going to try to be as charitable as possible. Number 2, I'm not interested in people who believe in isolated conspiracy theories. That is to say, if you believe that the US government assassinated John F. Kennedy, but the current president is a great guy with the people's best interest in mind and his own autonomy, you're out. You don't qualify for the study. So similarly, this is not the DSM-4, and I'm not trying to count up an amount of symptoms and say if you believe in 3 to more conspiracy theories for 6 or more months, then you have metaphysical pathology. It's nothing like that. The key is meaningful connectivity. I only want to talk about people who believe that every possible bastion of hope is a pacifier, and the whole world is under control not by capitalism or the Foucauldian notion of power or instrumental reason or any other amorphous form or factor, least of all justice. In order to pull off this move, a theorist must believe in no less than a global, or perhaps even interstellar, web of players that span the course of known history and have been successful enough in what they do to continue their secret world domination well into the foreseeable future. Doom. This is because I want to argue that the conspiracy theory itself fills the God-shaped hole in our contemporary nihilistic subject by offering him or her a metaphysically significant object to worship. Now, what is this God-shaped hole? This is something I began to speak about with James' account of live or dead wires, that which is capable of spiritually enticing you, attracting you, turning you on. There's some spark that flies. This is not something that's usually based in logic. For some people, these sparks are created by gods, and for others, they are global conspiracy theories. Jung talks about the way that Westerners are beginning to look east to fill the hole as they sense this alarming poverty of symbols. And I see him tracking us slipping into nihilism. But here in the West, I'm still tracking this component down. And the short and hopefully unsatisfying answer is that the God-shaped hole is the reason that nihilism hurts. Now you might say nihilism doesn't hurt, but if nihilism doesn't hurt, you're probably indulging in some sort of a metaphysical curative. And if you're not, I'd like to read your paper. Because I think nihilism hurts. Onward. So I will argue that a conspiracy theory can serve as a metaphysically significant object for the purpose of filling the God-shaped hole. Now for this I need a personal God. This is not Spinoza's rationalism where we can talk about God, but really we're referring to a self-sufficient system without a will. For Spinoza, God is nature. For the Marxists, we can blame capitalism. For the critical theorists, we have instrumental reason. But a system with no face doesn't really fit in the God-shaped hole. Remember that Buddy Christ from Dogma? We want a personal God. You know, it was so much easier to hate George W. Bush than it was to hate capitalism, nepotism, power, instrumental reason. I can't get upset with traffic the way that I can get upset with a guy in front of me and take my will out as a person but it is traffic itself. It is a system that's frustrating us. How can you mobilize affective sentiment in the direction of traffic? You can't. You know, you have to be really smart to direct your hatred towards capitalism. Okay, so we're going to talk about hating, loving, having faith, powerful affective mobilizations towards a manifold, a system, a faceless something. And for that, I want to engage the work of my prophet. He's a cat named David Icke. Has anybody ever heard of David Icke? Hands? Okay, good, because I get to explain what he talks about, and it's going to be fun. David Icke has written roughly a dozen 500-page tomes, and he has been translated into at least 6 languages, and he gives 10-hour-long lectures on this conspiracy theory internationally to packed houses of thousands of people. He's also quite a strange guy because he had a period of time where he only wore turquoise because of the vibrational tendencies of the color. And during this turquoise period, he went on television and he claimed to be the Son of God. And he said it was taken out of context. Thank you. Let there be light! He said it was taken out of context, but he never took it back. So, a recent article. David Icke was perhaps one of the most ridiculed men in Britain. But looking at the 2,100 people who paid $45 a head to listen to him in New York at the weekend, all of them wearing shirts, taking down notes on their phones, or posting minute-by-minute updates on Icke fan forums, sat and listened attentively as the former Coventry City footballer spent 8 hours railing against U.S. government weapons, satanic pedophile politicians leeching energy from children, and of course, the lizard people and their plot for world domination. Has anybody heard of the lizard people? Okay, this is the guy, the lizard people guy. Right. So looking at David Icke's conspiracy theory chronologically is immediately interesting because it covers the advent of Homo sapiens. Now this is not quite the book of Genesis, but it attempts to explain the origin of humankind, particularly the leaps in cerebral size that are supposedly unaccounted for. He says that people banter about a missing link or something, and he's very unsatisfied. He claims that an alien race known as the Anunnaki performed genetic experiments and created humans as a slave race to do their bidding, a position that we've never gotten out of, he says. Yeah. He speaks of a ruling order of this first people who bred solely for genetic purity, and to this day still maintain the same bloodlines and the same methods. Now this is easier to swallow when he points to the practices of European royalty and so-called Eastern establishment families, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Bush, as immediate evidence. You know, the aristocracy is inbred. That's just, we know that. But now we know why. Now all the while this narrative is walking a tight parallel with scriptural history. The history of the Old Testament as well as ancient Sumerian tablets. They depict the dawn of man, he says, through these genetic experiments. Now Icke is working with the translation of tablets by a cat named Zechariah Sitchin, who is the author of Ancient Astronauts and also an avid theorist. As you can imagine, advanced alien technology is not only responsible for humanity, but also the pyramids and other enigmatic ancient structures. Aliens are also deemed accountable for scriptural accounts of supernatural power, even the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah as part of an ancient high-tech battle. Icke is appealing to Sitchin's translation of people meeting their demise as pillars of salt, rather as pillars of vapor. Pretty cool. Yeah, there you go. Oh man, I can't cover it all. I can't get, but he's got it all. If you say something, I'll just shake my head. Yes, Boston Marathon bombing. I'm assuming that but we'll get to that. This seems to imply that we have historical accounts in ancient texts of highly advanced technology, and it also it basically lends credence to Scripture while it is hijacking it. It basically says your holy book is correct in depicting what I say it's depicting, but your whole religion is a lie. So while the use of scripture to anchor the theory may raise a red flag, I'm far more compelled by the fact that this book is claiming that the great villain of this conspiracy theory is responsible for the creation of humankind. That's already quite godlike. This is an essential feature, indeed, of God-subject, creator-created relationships, and it carries the opportunity for a religious attitude towards the entity that we are beginning to talk about. Ike's narrative continues to follow the ruling elite through known history, implicating figures from Alexander the Great to Cleopatra, Charlemagne, the British royal family, nearly every president from George Washington to George W. Bush. Quote, this is Ike, "They are not interbreeding through snobbery, but through to hold a genetic structure which gives them certain abilities, the ability, especially the ability to shape-shift and manifest other forms," end quote. Now these other forms that he speaks of are that of an alien reptilian race from the lower fourth dimension, or lower astral plane, if you're a New Ager. Now this fourth dimension, to Ike, is a metaphysical realm that has access to the world, but is never entirely a part of it. According to Ike, these global power players, who have been interbreeding for millennia, have retained a genetic quality that allows their psychic apparatus to be accessed by alien consciousness. He refers to the global elite as red dresses who can be slipped on and slipped into by alien consciousness from the lower fourth dimension. So they're puppets. This is important because it expands the realm of these beings beyond the known and knowable world, offering their species metaphysical standing for those who believe in them. Now these members of the global elite will ostensibly continue to comport themselves to the will of alien consciousness because they have always been genetically predisposed to do so. They will continue to maintain the purity of their bloodlines because they must in order to continue to have the capacity to channel this alien consciousness and perpetuate this Babylonian brotherhood. He says that because they originated in Babylon in the most prevalence. He depicts, basically, a dynasty of individuals that have zero individual goals. All they want to do is continue to further the agenda, which is a millennia-old agenda. And they're quite powerful, so it doesn't seem as if they are going to change plans anytime soon. Their collective will is unbroken, and the Brotherhood, understood as a manifold, is essentially immortal. So, time. I was going to have a big clock. Put it right here. I'm low on props. Here we have a manifold of entities who have ruled the world in this way for many millennia, and they will continue to do so for millennia if we don't do something. But he never says what that something is. So Ike's reptilians form a metaphysical fabric that stretches temporally from the very advent of the human being across virtually every significant moment of our history and endlessly into our foreseeable future. So all this talk of time and eternity, I am reminded of the fact that St. Augustine was brought to God by a deep desire for the eternal. In the Confessions, Augustine speaks of the death of a friend whom he loved dearly, a pure, naive, idealistic, perhaps perfect love. In fact, he loved him as if he was never going to die. Now he comes to the realization that such an unrestrained love must be reserved for that which is permanent. But the fact that Augustine's idealistic love is a love with reckless abandon, one with no qualifiers, should reveal to us a primordial notion of love that is handed down to us from ancestor upon ancestor. This is the first love. This is the love that is entirely unafraid of ever falling on deaf ears or an unwilling recipient. This is the fire love that burns us beyond recognition until we learn not to give it as we grow up to become well-educated, jaded nihilists. Beauteous. Yeah, so we want to love as if the recipient of our love is immortal and thus our love eternal. It is only when we are hurt in the way that Augustine describes it, we realize that such an enterprise is foolish and we must love other mortals either with some level of restraint or at least without attachment. Do we have any enlightened lovers in the house who love without attachment? All right. Well, if any, yeah, great. Now, if anybody can reconcile that, even if you can say that love without attachment is true, you need to learn that. That's something you need to come to. And the primordial love, this naive love, is something that wants to be immortal. It wants to be eternal. And it is this primordial love that I think is hooked up to the notion of the God-shaped whole. Love of God. We'll get there, though. I promise. Augustine loved his friend in such a way that it pained him greatly to let him go. And in the process of letting go, every element of Augustine's experience was colored with death. All of reality bore this stain of impermanence. This experience, this deliverance from naivete, taught him, quote, not everything grows old, but everything dies. The lens through which Augustine grew to see the meaningless of all of his worldly ambitions. Thus he saw something distinctly immune from the inevitability of death. Okay, so while it is inevitably true that many believers in Christianity find particular comfort in the knowledge that they have an immortal soul, and that soul is destined to spend eternity in euphoric proximity to their Creator, the desire that Augustine is expressing here is not quite as such. This desire for permanence was not necessarily a desire to be immortal, but a desire to apprehend an immortal concept, to know and love something beyond death, the death that took his beloved friend away. For the nihilist, or let us say the naturalist, this thirst to apprehend the immortal cannot be satisfied in anything in nature. The life of an individual is finite, the life of the earth is finite, and potentially someday some physicist is going to calculate the amount of time we have before the universe itself ceases to exist. This is all conceivable to us. This is part of the draw of metaphysics, because physics without the meta offers nothing permanent when held up to the unforgiving light of reason. And there is a deep, ancient, and childlike love that we are born with, which can only be satisfied by a metaphysical concept of some sort. David Icke offers his readers something closer to an immortal being, creator of humanity no less, than can be fathomed in any other way. Okay, so we have time down, we have the immortality down, we need to cover space. Are the aliens omnipresent? Are they everywhere? Perhaps humanity is offered some level of respite. He does seem to implicate every imaginable religious, secular, and clandestine organization in his account of the conspiracy. He does maintain the principle of the pyramid. Now you can picture that symbol. You ever see a dollar bill man? And then they have the brick pyramid. And then above the pyramid there's the floating capstone. Does everybody feel this image? I need PowerPoint or a pen. The floating eye above the... awesome. Yeah, there you have it. There you have it. Now, while it looks like somebody who could climb up to the top of that, Icke emphasizes the fact that there's a space between the floating pyramid and everything else. You can climb the corporate or the social or the financial ladder only so high before you have to jump this gap to where the Illuminati are. And so there's no way to really climb to the power that they have without finding yourself under their control. If you're familiar with Bill Hicks, you ever hear the one where he says, whatever the president, whatever he promises on the campaign trail, it doesn't matter because as soon as he gets elected, they take him into a smoke-filled room where there's 12 industrial scumbags that got him in, and there's a big guy in the back with a cigar, and he says, roll the tape. And the tape is of the Kennedy assassination from an angle that you've never seen it before. So Kennedy gets shot, the tape is over, and he says, any questions? And the incoming president says, just what my agenda is. So that's Bill Hicks. The good news for us is that, for me at least, is that they are only interested in influencing events of global significance, which serves as justification as to why Icke has not been assassinated. Now, perhaps they didn't like Bill Hicks and they gave him cancer. That happens in the X-Files. Now, Icke explains that the modus operandi of the Brotherhood is that of covert control, a rule by mystery, a rule from the shadows. Assassinating Icke may actually lend credence to his cause. Popular or not, he is still quite marginal as far as they are concerned. Or perhaps they appreciate the manner in which Icke strikes fear into the heart of potential dissenters on their behalf. Either way, they are allegedly quite few in numbers, so we would think they would occupy less space and be less ubiquitous, thus less God-sized. But actually the reverse is true in terms of casting the metaphysical spell. This is another essential similarity to God, the spatial similarity to God, in that he is impossible to seek in the physical world, and the mantle of his power cannot be attained by normal human beings. Just as Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor told Jesus, the people wanted to be ruled by miracle, by authority, and as we see here, by mystery. And the Lord works in mysterious ways, and so shall the Babylonian Brotherhood. Okay, so we're on to the problem of evil. Christianity was famously asked, if the God of Abraham is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good, then why is it that he allows such evil to befall his beloved children? Is everybody familiar with this little story? I'll give you a short one. The three rejections. One is that he's all-good and all-knowing, meaning that he knows what's going on, he wants to stop it, doesn't quite have the power. Two is that he's all-powerful and he's all-good, but he doesn't quite know what's going on, so he would come save us like Superman, but he doesn't, he doesn't know all of our suffering. The last one is that he is all-powerful and he is all-knowing, but he's not all-good. He understands that we're suffering, has the power to change it, and just doesn't care. All of these get rejected because they are not what they're talking about when they're asking a question of the God of Abraham. He must be all three. Now, we're not going to solve the problem of evil right now because we have a finite amount of time, and we're definitely not going to solve it with Ike's conspiracy. And I wanted to use it because I like the way that it doesn't solve it. So number one, omnipotence, all-powerfulness. According to Ike, the human race was created by the aliens, and every stage of our history, our religions, the rise and fall of our nations has been dictated by their grand design. We have been spoon-fed technology that has allegedly been around for hundreds of thousands of years. Remember, if spaceships and genetic engineering existed tens of thousands of years ago when they made us, your iPhone 5 is not that awesome. So, the conspiracy theorists, for the conspiracy theorists, this situation in which technology is pushing the evolution of society faster than the evolution of the human psyche would be something that they could be consciously engineering and upon which they can be capitalizing. We can talk about this quite a bit. Now, the aliens go to war when they choose. They kill Kennedy on television. They may not be all-powerful, but they're probably powerful enough to satisfy the category that warrants the worship that I argue they receive from theorists. Are we happy to give them the all-powerful? Ish? Okay. Well, strictly speaking, omnipotence is any sort is arguable. Because one can ask if God can perform an action that limits his own power. Can God make a rock that's so heavy that he can't even pick it up? Well, if he can, he's all-powerful, and if he can, he's all-powerful, so That's what I say back to you. So are we allowed to give Ike's conspiracy the all-powerful?
Sure.
Great! We're believers. It's going to happen. Omniscience. Our grand villains are said to be symbolized by the all-seeing eye that sits on the top of the grand pyramid, meaning the top of every hierarchical institution worth controlling, and thus they have access to all the stored information that we could understand. Have you guys heard of this Edward Snowden?
Yes.
Okay, so he's that NSA guy who's defecting, and basically I saw an interview with him, and what he is saying is what they do is they will store all information. They will listen to all cell phones in the whole world, and they will tie them to our social security numbers because I have to pay my bill, Verizon. What's your social security number? Well, it's social insurance number, I'm sorry. American. Shoot. Now I'm really in trouble. Oh, it is sad. Shoot. I'm in trouble. Alright, so let me recover. Basically, they will retroactively spy on anybody they want to. If they find out that you are actually somebody that they need to look at, they just look at the recordings of you that they've been doing and not listening to. If your cell phone can understand it when you say, navigate to Villain's Bistro, and then it just immediately starts telling you which way to go, imagine what our voices can do if their supercomputers are simulated to listen to all of us at once. So the idea of omniscience is not something that's so terrifying, and we're not in the situation anymore where you can just say, my conversations aren't that important. Who really cares what it is that I'm saying? Well, robots can listen to them forever, and they can just be stored and everything. So we don't get out of it that way. We don't even really need Jeremy Bentham's notion that by understanding that we are being surveilled, we are actually being surveilled. We just really actually are being surveilled all the time. So if you don't believe that at the top of this political power structure are amorphous forces like justice itself, or checks and balances, or the will of the people, to which our elected officials are beholden, if instead you just believe that aliens are running the show and we, the people, are being deceived, then this last category that I'm going to talk to is going to be quite the problem indeed. The third, omnibenevolence, all good. God is personally invested in you. God has a plan. God loves you. Jesus loves you. Atheists hate hearing that, right? Does not make atheists mad. Just say Jesus loves you. They get mad. This attribute of God is actually the most powerful that we're going to study because it is the means of sustainability by which the primordial and uncompromising love that we discussed above can become a viable metaphysical feedback loop, a homeostasis of metaphysical love. The true believer mobilizes the most significant affective output possible, and is not only is it received, but it is reciprocated. I love my God, and my God loves me. Now, this relationship for the believer in Ike's system, in the aliens, has with the object of his faith. Now, this is the polar opposite of what we're talking about with this mutual love between creator and created we have just described. However, it does not lack the awe and the fear. Abraham, Isaac, fear and trembling. Awe is an essential attribute of religiosity. But here we have awe of God without love of God. According to Ike, these reptilians feed on the psychic energy of human misery. Now he shows his New Age roots by basically saying that they are feeding on our bad vibes. This is Ike. Quote, our energy resonates at the lower fourth dimensional frequency, and there it is absorbed by the reptilians, aliens. The more of these emotions, guilt, fear, aggression, that can be stimulated, the more energy the reptilians have to work with. So for this reason, they engage in rituals that will bring about human suffering, and they reap the negative energy as a reward. Now, if you're going to swallow many of the theories that he expounds, you're going to have to believe that the powers that be have a motive apart from concentrating wealth and consolidating power. His spin on the JFK assassination, for instance, is unique in that he mentions that it was primarily intended to simultaneously horrify millions of people via the still nascent enterprise of television. Now, the second chapter in his book, The Biggest Secret, is sort of a disclaimer about his commitment to the reptilian hypothesis. He writes that many people implore him to drop this portion of the system and to make it about politics and organized corruption. He can't do this, and I wouldn't be talking about him if he could. Few of the horrible things that he talks about the global elite doing, like hunting humans for sport, eating flesh, ritually murdering children, few of these things would make any sense without such a radical claim. Now, something like this is almost certainly a prerequisite for believing the entirety of the system, due to the fact that the motivations of the dynastic families in question go far beyond the maintenance of global control, the accumulation of wealth, much less patriotism, revenge, or any other possible motive. To accept some of the things he says in his book, you really need to believe that human suffering is the psychic fuel for those in power. Now, what this does, interestingly enough, is absolve humanity of the most horrific atrocities. Ike is quite thorough, known to talk for 10 hours sometimes, expanding his system to encompass every significant event and figure in history. And when he does this, he finds every opportunity to implicate the Brotherhood in the horrors, from the Crusades to the whole of World War II. And many people spend quite a bit of time trying to talk about how humans could have possibly done many things associated with World War II. It is as if Ike doesn't believe that humans are capable of terrible things. There's a sort of a soteriological element here, that power itself is wrested from the hands of human leaders and rested upon alien shoulders as sort of a scapegoat of our sins. Now, all of these atrocities are no longer done by us, but they are done to us. Now, this is a way to dehumanize and pretty much literally demonize all of the worst people that we can think of. The human race itself becomes relatively pure, washed clean of all sins, save those committed under coercion. That's a possibility that we can talk about a little bit. The saving grace of David Icke. Now this statement is the home stretch, and it comes a little bit late. We've been psychologizing about religious belief, and I want to take a shot at rehumanizing it. So help me out here. One of the caveats of reducing religious experience to empirical study is the fact that we fail to do justice to the magnitude of faith in God as an ontological presupposition. The affective phenomena associated with religious faith for the true believer are perhaps so powerful that they cannot be analyzed from a detached perspective. Faith is essentially the antithesis of a detached perspective. The Hebraic theologian Abraham Heschel describes true faith in God as not only a primary lens through which experience is mediated, but the very conditions for the possibility of experience, the alpha, the omega, the totality of experience itself, as well as the entirety of its telos, and all that is conceivable beyond, and then still more. When we imagine God from a detached, theoretical perspective, it is impossible to convey such gravity. Now to go back entirely on what I just said, and assume that the capacity for such belief is part of human nature, it is very difficult to see how somebody who is committed to the existence of such a manifold of entities could avoid infiltration of this human tendency. In the worst cases of metaphysical pathology, a person would surely assimilate the conspiracy theory as an ontological presupposition. Now, the reason that I was just so terribly insincere and tried to appeal to the ineffability of faith is that I want to try to drive home the fact what it would be like to live in this reality, to subscribe to this worldview. This belief system has the potential to become even more than the primary a priori category for the theorist. It becomes God. It becomes the creator, the destroyer, the watcher, the god of war, and it does this to a person who is often an atheist, agnostic, or ambiguous New Age spiritualist. Those who believe in super conspiracies are often proud of the fact that they have seen through religion, and yet it is the self-same net in which they are unknowingly caught. Unfortunately, they lack the reciprocating metaphysical love. They have only the fear of God. If the reptilians do indeed subsist on the suffering of mankind, and they have engineered every brick of their proverbial pyramid to bring about and feed upon the greatest possible suffering for the greatest possible number of people, it would seem that a conspiracy theorist who is experiencing a religious mode of comportment towards the lizard people would be mobilizing the most intense possible affective investment in the direction of their arch enemy, those most aware of the international, interstellar, paradimensional manifold of entities would not be freest from their thrall, but they would be those deepest within it. Now, if we were to accept the idea of these entities, that these entities subsist on the negative energy of humanity, then these theorists would be not the greatest threats to the aliens, but they are most efficient producers of power. Now, here's the variant. If you consider one of the large analyses made in the movie The Matrix, the powers that be have humanity unknowingly plugged into a system by which their belief in false experience of their life is the manner in which the powers that be sustain themselves. They are living off those who passively accept experience like batteries. But if we read Icke charitably, we assume that he means to disconnect those who passively accept the illusion from bleeding their affective lifeblood into the system. What I'm arguing is that knowledge of the conspiracy itself becomes a mechanism by which the deepest feelings are now entangled in the most negative possible object of worship. Last paragraph. For one who may begin godless, careful study of the methods, the nature, and the history of this conspiracy leads to the knowledge that the Brotherhood is actually the most supreme imaginable power. A continued commitment to this study, and eventually a sort of a search for the Brotherhood begins. It is found in the media's superficial treatment of issues, in the prevalence of entertainment that seems intended to keep people complacent, in the overwhelming intuition that the powerful people are simply not who they seem to be. We are being lied to. The shadow grows beyond endless curtains, into the unknown, deeper into the distant abyss, and deeper into the sacred place in the theorist that has been for so long vacant. The proselytizing that follows is a testament to the faith. The faith in an entity that is immortal, ubiquitous, all-powerful, all-knowing, ever-watchful, and wholeheartedly malevolent. Like no other entity in your scope of reality, it is your God that seeks your slavery, your suffering, your blood. Now, if there's a practical application to this project, it will be to elucidate a way in which self-identified radical free thinkers can actually find themselves enslaved by an enemy that is deified by their own zealotry. My hope is that theorists can react to this and continue to contest power with an awareness of this reified deity's unique power over them. Thank you. Thanks.
That reminds me, I have a box of books for you. At one point at Oakland University, they sent, the Scientologists actually sent a whole honkin' bunch, like 10 books and a DVD, to every part-time instructor at my university, in the hopes that we would start teaching Scientology. So it's in my house, don't leave Windsor without it. Alright, now, if we're about to hear commentary from Dr. Bionic Truce.
Okay, so just a brief commentary on this paper. Down?
No, stick it right in front of your face so we can hear.
Oh, like this?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, a second. So it is my opinion that most of us are regional, at least regional conspiracy theorists. And I use the term opinion because my evidence is largely anecdotal. As the memory of 9/11 wanes, everyone I speak with expresses at least some level of skepticism regarding the claim that the Twin Towers fell simply because of the planes that struck them. For example, perhaps the towers fell the way they did because bombs were implanted in the building, demolition style, before the plane struck, just to help things along and to ensure the falling towers didn't take out the Brooklyn Bridge. Or the Air Force, on orders of inside conspirators, purposely held back taking out the approaching planes, or maybe a missile hit the Pentagon and not a plane, and or the Bush administration had an overplane 9/11, either passively by ignoring intelligence information, or actively by conspiring with the terrorists in order to justify invading oil-rich Iraq. And no one I've spoken with actually believes that JFK was killed by Oswald alone, contrary to the wisdom of the Warren Commission. It was the mob, the CIA, J. Edgar Hoover, the Republicans, or perhaps lizard-like aliens from outer space. So this type of regional conspiracy theorizing, however, is not the focus of Nathan's talk, but rather he's concerned with more global conspiracy theories. For example, Marxists believe that the industrialized world is run by short-sighted, profit-hungry capitalists who collude with each other and with politicians. Radical feminists maintain that the patriarchy is to blame for the inequality of women. Malcolm X believed that white people have conspired to keep people of color oppressed. Ancient alien theorists maintain that the Great Pyramids of Egypt, along with Walmart superstores, were constructed by alien lizards and so forth. And they may all be right, as Nathan would admit. Like Nathan, I'm not here to reject any of these claims, especially the view that Walmart is actually alien in origin. However, Nathan ignores a third type of conspiracy theorizing that is very prevalent in our society today, namely conspiracy theorizing of what I would call the third kind. It involves the tendency of people to believe that any major event must of necessity be infected by conspiratorial elements. Many who believe that JFK was assassinated by the mob or the CIA also tend to believe that Al-Qaeda is not solely responsible for the destruction of the Twin Towers, and that Martin Luther King was murdered by white supremacists bent on stopping the civil rights movement. Or that the oil companies conspired to keep gasoline prices artificially high. Perhaps the star of The Sopranos didn't die of a heart attack, but instead he was rubbed out by the mob. So they may not believe that any one group is responsible for all of these events, but they appear to believe that most major events are the result of some conspiring group or another. This third type of conspiracy theorizing is a result of our inability to accept that any major historical event, such as a world leader being assassinated, could possibly be the result of some unpredictable random event. World events are far too important for them. If JFK had slipped on a banana peel and died by hitting his head on the ground, then J. Edgar Hoover would have put it there. So conspiracies are a way of life for contemporary people who have lost faith in God and providence. Conspiracy theories, whether regional, global, or of the third kind that I've just identified, are symptoms of a society bereft of belief in providence or the gods or God. We are a secular society inhabiting the third rock from the sun in an expanding cosmos without divine support that through desperation needs to grasp onto something, anything, and that something is belief that no major world event happens very randomly. So conspiracy theories are not just held by a few marginal people with nothing better to do. Rather, they are a way of life in a postmodern society. It's noteworthy that global conspiracy theories occur in science and mathematics, and not just in views presented on History Channel's Ancient Aliens or cafes where people speculate about how JFK really died. For example, there's Richard Dawkins' theory of the selfish gene. No matter who assassinated JFK, it all reduces to selfish genes that are really just aggregates of DNA, and that are trying to perpetuate themselves into eternity, into immortality. We are nothing more than vehicles for genes bent on world domination. And of course, the Big Bang theorists would argue that everything that exists today is a result of one sole, impersonally conspiratorial cosmic event that happened roughly 10 billion years ago. Many biologists maintain that a patriarchal scientific community prevented Rosalind Franklin from receiving the Nobel Prize for her work in X-ray crystallography that informed the research of Watson and Crick regarding the double helical structure of DNA. In a secular society bereft of the supernatural, everyone needs to hold on to something, whether it's the Big Bang, the selfish gene, the capitalists, the communists, Hoover and his evil banana peel, the patriarchy, or all of the above. Therefore, conspiracy theories occur everywhere, in every discipline, in some form or another. Conspiracy theories are mainstream and not marginalized, as Nathan seems to maintain. Nathan argues that the logic behind those who hold conspiracy theories is a marginalized logic that involves three core elements. First, my theory challenges me, and I accept the challenge. Second, my theory is something that most people find hard to swallow, palatable. And third, my theory is rejected by the masses, so that it must be right. However, this type of thinking is mainstream, and at the very core is scientific reasoning, as is argued by people such as Karl Popper and also Thomas Kuhn, at least with respect to revolutionary science. So consider the Copernican revolution. The masses initially rejected the theory, nor could they handle the possibility that the heliocentric theory was correct. And the theory certainly challenged Copernicus and Galileo, and moreover, they accepted the challenge regardless of opposition from the church. Einstein started working out the patent on this, and only later, once his radical non-Newtonian theories of special general relativity were accepted, did he end up at Princeton. Then there was string theory, and the view that evolution happened due to random genetic drift alone, rather than through natural selection. Everyone thought that set theory, as a basis of all of mathematics, could one day be proven consistent and complete, until Gödel came onto the scene with an esoteric proof that was initially rejected, but eventually accepted by the mathematical community. Scientific progress, and moreover generally progress in any field, depends on people advancing both bold new theories that the masses initially reject, theories that challenge the people advancing them and that the masses find difficult to accept. Thus, the logic behind conspiracy theories is mainstream and not marginalized. I would like to thank the CIA the FBI, the communists, the capitalists, the mob, the patriarchy, and the oil companies for financing the research.
Now, I think we'll have about 5 minutes for Nathan to respond, and then he'll handle questions for about 10. Is that cool?
Oh.
Okay.
I definitely agree that we live in a society in which conspiracy theories are part of the mainstream, but I think that they kind of orbit around this periphery, and that sort of conspiratorial ideation is okay, it's fine, and once it gets sucked into a centralized location and it infiltrates that ontological presupposition, from there it is systemic. It has metastasized, it is taking over, and if we start to have a conversation about music, I can immediately, react with, well, the only reason that these people are, Lady Gaga is famous is because she's an Illuminati clone and they're using this in order, every image on every screen is there for a reason. And once you get to the point where the problem is systemic, I would say that is the switch, because I think otherwise people could hold these peripheral conspiratorial beliefs. Like it's pretty impossible to believe that. I'm trying to think of another one that's just goes around, but JFK is the best one. The one that's like, oh, exactly what they say on TV happened. Like there are movies about it. That's an okay conspiracy theory. Like me getting up in here and talking about David Icke's aliens and the fact that anybody who's a global elite has their psyche is infiltrated by aliens. Anything like that is beyond marginalized, because it's just it is too difficult to bear. It's too hard to handle, and it would crush somebody if they actually held that belief and didn't have some sort of counterbalancing new agey I'm a warrior of light against this sort of a thing happening. And in his book, he gives you about 499 pages of evil, and then like 12 pages of, but it's all good. Just go off and eat vegetables with me. There's just not nearly enough of that warrior of light stuff that you get out on the West Coast at every other coffee shop that's not a conspiracy theory coffee shop. So that would be my response to that. But if anybody has questions, I've got maybe about 10 minutes.
Okay, great song. Very, very rich, very engaging, and super fun. I'm going to say that I'm going to flatten out your main thesis, like really flatten out and say, every philosophical theory in and of itself, as Brian, I think, tried to say on the other side, is in some way a kind of conspiracy theory. What is the qualitative difference between imputing causation and thinking conspiracy? I'll give you 2 examples. One you mentioned. Many mid-17th century philosophers, happens to be my period, decided that there was a life force in human beings called the archaeus sometimes, or many other kind of, lots of names, but a kind of vital force, unseeable, not empirically verifiable, but that animated the being. This becomes, to quote someone that you mentioned, the conatus in Spinoza, the idea that there is this thing, this life force that drives us. Now, what we do when we think through the problem, if we're 17th century philosophers, is impute causation. We do that all the time. So is there a qualitative difference between David Icke saying lizards control the worlds and the archaeus is the life force?
I think it's an awesome question, and I definitely want to take it a little bit further, because this is when this becomes an MRP. What I would say in response to this, and I don't know if it's satisfying to you, is that the
No, it's not.
already I think that I mentioned Jung, but I didn't go into my research of this. When he talks about archetypes, his archetypal notion of God, and I'm being quite Western, but conspiracy theorists are usually quite Western. So the God of Abraham is a perfect imago Dei, image of God. God is made in man's image. Man is made in God's image. That reciprocal effect right there, I feel, is key in the question that you're asking, because in David Icke's conspiracy theory, we have, yes, a manifold, but at the same time we have a will. We have something that has desires that it is fulfilling through its enslavement of humanity. And the concept to which you're referring reminds me of other concepts that are they're metaphysical concepts, but they remind me more of the category that I tried to treat in terms of capitalism, instrumental reason, and the Foucaultian notion of power. Something that is amorphous and not will-less. It's not a personal God. And I think that the, psychologically speaking, the mode of comportment towards a personal God is something that's very necessarily, it's something that does the God-shaped whole thing, while the anything outside of that, when you're talking about something amorphous, you need to mobilize the intellect in order to ascertain that sort of a thing. If you're going to have a religion that's based on the force, or something that is a little bit less personal, it's something that you need some sort of a spiritual discipline to do, while the God-shaped whole, I would argue, would be ready-made.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment on what you just said, and then I'll get to my question. I mean, the idea of personal God is not central to most religions. It's central to one interpretation of Christianity, but the Judaic God is not personal. It's alien. The Islamic God is not personal. It's other. Buddhism. I mean, that idea of a personal, loving relationship between God and particular individuals is a Christian idea. It's not a religious. It's not generically religious idea. But I want to suggest that, although I thought the talk was tremendously engaging and it was a lot of fun. I agree with Stephen. I'm glad I'm not your thesis supervisor, because I want to suggest there's a fundamental difference between what you get in classical metaphysical accounts of the origin of the universe, the Judeo-Christian Islamic religious accounts, and something like Ike. If you look at the conceptual structure of religious accounts such as you get in Genesis and in classical metaphysics, these are extremely parsimonious conceptually. You get structure from structurelessness, you get order from chaos, and they map very nicely. And I don't know if Ryan might think, but contemporary physics, while it has a lot of mathematical machinery, conceptually it's also very parsimonious, right? You have a singularity, and then you have disorder, and then you have structure evolving. What Ike is giving is so incredibly rich in detail as to be of a different kind of story. And it responds to mental illness, and I'm not joking, and profound loneliness. It speaks to profound loneliness. And the 2,100 people, which is not very many people, who show up for this nonsense are lonely people. People who go to church are not necessarily lonely people. So I think that it's not speaking to a desire for God. God and metaphysics and science all speak to the human need for meaning and a permanent memory, as you said very nicely, to make our own lives make sense. The story of the lizard people and everything, that's not a need for ultimate meaning. That's a need to find belonging somewhere. Right? I think that's a different need. That's my point I'd like to know. But then, as I was formulating this question, I had to go for a piss. And on the bulletin board, what do I find but the lizard people meeting in Windsor tonight? I'll pass it around. So I don't know what that makes sense.
I was in the bathroom.
Yeah, no,
That's Providence.
It's not the bathroom. It's the lizard people. But no, honestly, it is lizard people. But my question still stands until. Yeah, I think that they speak different things of people.
That's Providence. Okay. I'm gonna try to touch on some of what you said for your first comment. Is I definitely respect the fact that there are multiplicity of God concepts, and the concept of a personal God I think appeals to basically most of our conspiracy theorists exist within the Judeo-Christian theater. Those images have kind of filtered, the images of a personal God have kind of filtered into the life of most of our conspiracy theorists, and they're receiving Christianity through the media and through their postmodern atheist parents. You know, this is like the generation that I'm looking at right here. The people who follow Ike. He's a relatively new phenomenon, and I think that he is. This is their engagement is not one that respects a multiplicity of deities, and I still feel like the other forms, especially Buddhism, is something that you must train for. You can't be a weekend warrior Buddhist, you know, if you're going to go into that, and that sort of a notion of God is, you know, entirely alien to a metaphysical, like a personal God. I'm trying to think of what you're saying. All right, and you also mentioned that a God lies outside of creation, and I totally agree with that as well. And what I was trying to do with that, and I don't know if it works, is the fact that they exist in another dimension and can access this, but they exist outside of it, and the notion that they are relatively permanent, that they are the creator. I still think that these things satisfy the paternal images that would be something like an archetypal image, something like what Jung argues we get our religious comportment from. The fact that we have the God image, and we're looking at that, and it has something to do with an ancient search for creation that has been that has basically been, you know, the genetic programming throughout evolution. I spoke in the talk a little bit about the fact that now, as we get into a technological age, our memes are moving faster than our genes can keep up with. We basically have a situation in which our politicians show up on TV, and we want a personal politician. Like, I'm from the States, so Barack Obama symbolizes hope and change and all these other things. So Barack Obama, the candidate, is part of this. There we go. Part of this manifold. He's a single guy, and then he's the college student who knocks on your door. He's the sign you see. He's his speechwriter. He's all of these people, all of these promises, and all of these forces that are exerted upon this one person. He's a symbol, you know. But to us, we think that he matters as a candidate, and then you take him and you pull him out of this manifold and you stick him in the Oval Office, and then you expect him to be the same person, and then people are dissatisfied. I think now more than ever we have personal images that we attach to that are not what they seem. And I think that not only fuels this metaphysical need, but it also defines it. I don't know if that's satisfying.
No. One more?
One more? Anybody else?
Very short question. What's the opposite of conspiracy?
Wow. I cannot answer that. I guess if there were an opposite of conspiracy, it would be maybe the blind acceptance of truth, a capital T truth in every moment that you're constantly getting. So I don't know if there could be an opposite.
I guess my question gets at the problem of counterfactual reflexes in human beings. That is, there may be no opposite, which might make the concept, with all due respect, useless because it's everywhere. See what I mean?
I guess so. But
Maybe
I was, go ahead.
a kind of utopian. I mean, one thinks about how change comes to be, right? Political change. And one can point to a few instances of grand, sort of historical, tumultuous change. And they came about precisely because of this thinking. I'm thinking about the English Revolution, I'm thinking about the Reformation, I'm thinking about these ways where the God-shaped whole becomes a means for change. So when I ask what's the opposite of conspiracy, the answer is there isn't, maybe there isn't. It's just how the conspiracy is figured for change. the lizard stuff doesn't mobilize revolutionary forces.
I
No.
would argue that it snuffs it out.
Yeah, perhaps.
Because it makes you, you're, in that case, you're not fighting corruption, but you're fighting an immortal, invincible, all-knowing.
Eternal rule. Yeah.
True. Well, I like what you're talking about.
All right.
I mean, I guess all I can say about that is that the level, what I'm talking about is a tipping point between entertaining notions of corruption that could be systemic, and it could even be related in a global fashion. And there could even be aliens. You could hold many of these beliefs, and you can even hold a space for the possibility of their connectivity. But when it infiltrates the center and it becomes something that is like, all singing, all dancing, paranoid delusion that is the very center of you, and it's, oh, that's Bob. Don't talk to him. He's just going to talk about the lizard people. I think that I've met many people on the West Coast that are beyond that tipping point, and that's what made me want to be like, wow, I should write on you for like 55 pages. Thank you.
No, pleasure.
So please join me in thanking. Now, we're going to have a brief interlude. Nathan is going to play some music for us. We're going to make him sing for us. But how long of an interlude do you think?
Oh, before music?
Yeah, before music. 20 minutes? 20 minutes. And Stephen, can you play through the interlude? Excellent. So, without further ado, Stephen Pender, followed by Nathan Lynch, followed by Stephen Pender, and just quickly before, I would love to thank the folks at Villains for hosting this event. Making